At 13,000 feet, Els Van Doren pulled her ripcord. Nothing happened. She pulled her reserve. It tangled instantly. As she plummeted toward the earth at 120 miles per hour, her helmet camera recorded every desperate second of her search for a canopy that wasn't there. But this wasn't a tragic accident. When investigators found her gear in a garden in eastern Belgium, they found something chilling. 2 precise surgical cuts in the nylon cords. Someone had murdered Els before she ever stepped onto that plane, and then they jumped right out of the door behind her. This is the case of the parachute murder, a story of a twisted love triangle, a silent betrayal in the sky, and the man who walked away from it all without a single charge. I'm DeadDocket, and this is the story.
Els Van Doren was a mother of 2 and a master skydiver with over 2,300 jumps. She was respected, loved, and by all accounts, living her best life in Antwerp. She was married to a wealthy jeweler, stable, and deeply embedded in the tight-knit community of her local skydiving club in Flanders. To everyone looking in from the outside, Els had it all. But Els had a shadow she couldn't see. Her friend, a woman she nicknamed Babs, was sharing more than just a hobby with her. They were sharing a man. Babs, whose real name was Els Klottemans, was a 26-year-old primary school teacher. She was younger, less experienced, and struggled deeply with anxiety and self-esteem. When she joined the club, Els Van Doren took her under her wing. The nickname Babs was meant as a kindness, a way to welcome her into the group. But beneath that awkward exterior, Klottemans was harboring an intense, obsessive fixation. And that fixation centered entirely on a man named Marcel Summers. Marcel was a Dutch skydiver in the very same club. He was charming, physically fit, and highly available. Or at least, that is how he presented himself to both women. For months, he played an incredibly dangerous game. He was sleeping with Els Van Doren on certain nights, and sleeping with Els Klottemans on others. He kept them in total darkness, deliberately compartmentalizing his life so neither woman would find out about the other.
He fed on the validation of having 2 capable women vying for his attention, completely blind to the volatile psychological pressure cooking right beneath the surface. That is, until 1 week before the jump, when the 2 women finally collided at Marcel's front door. It was a Friday night, the evening typically reserved for Klottemans. She was already at Marcel's house, sleeping on a mattress downstairs.
But Els Van Doren arrived unexpectedly, under the impression that it was her private night to spend with Marcel. Instead of sending Van Doren away or coming clean, Marcel allowed her inside. He sent her upstairs to his bedroom. Downstairs, Klottemans lay awake on her mattress, listening to the man she loved sleeping with her rival directly above her head. It was a night of pure, unadulterated psychological torture. And in the dark of that living room, a terrible, calculated rage took root. The illusion had shattered, the love triangle had collapsed, and Klottemans decided right then that this arrangement had to end permanently.
The sabotage didn't happen in the air. It happened in the quiet of the equipment room. A few days after that traumatic night at Marcel's house, the opportunity presented itself. In the lull of a normal weekday afternoon at the club hangar, the skydiving gear was left unattended. The killer didn't just slash the chutes in a fit of sudden, manic rage. They engineered them to fail in a specific, highly technical sequence. It was a death trap designed by an expert. Using a pair of ordinary household scissors, Klottermans approached Els Van Doren's parachute rig. She didn't destroy the entire backpack. She knew that if she hacked away blindly, Els would notice the damage during her pre-flight safety check. Instead, she made 2 precise, localized cuts to the vital control lines of the main parachute. Then, she targeted the reserve chute, ensuring that when the emergency handle was pulled, the fabric would violently deploy directly into the failing main canopy, causing a catastrophic, unrecoverable tangle. It was a terrifyingly sophisticated bit of engineering. The rig would look completely normal on the ground. It would feel normal when strapped to Elle's back. It was designed to trigger only when she was completely mid-air, thousands of feet above the earth, where no one could save her. On that Saturday morning, November 18th, 2006, Van Doren, Babs and Marcel even linked hands in the air, forming a circle, a final, literal bond before the release. They jumped from 13,000 feet, executing a flawless 4-way formation alongside a 4th club member. They floated together in perfect unison, holding on to one another, smiling through their goggles. Marcel was there. Klottermans was there, staring directly into the eyes of the woman whose death sentence she had already signed. Then, at 4,000 feet, they broke the formation. They released their grip and scattered into the sky to deploy their canopies. Van Doren pulled her cord, and the camera recorded the rest. The main chute failed instantly, fluttering like a useless ribbon. She fought for her life, desperately executing emergency procedures as the ground rushed up to meet her. She pulled the reserve. It deployed straight into the dead weight of the main lines, twisting into a tight, useless knot. Her clubmates watched from above, paralyzed, as Els plummeted to her death, crashing into a residential garden in eastern Belgium.
The Belgian police had a problem. No fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses. When forensics examined the tangled mess of nylon in that Belgian garden, the physical evidence was incredibly sparse. But investigators had a motive that was dripping with venom. As they began digging into the personal lives of the club members, the clean, professional facade of the aviation group completely shattered. Investigators discovered that before the accident, Babs, real name Els Klottermans, had been waging a psychological war. She had been sending anonymous, vicious letters to mutual friends and family members, designed specifically to expose Van Doren's affair with Marcel and completely destroy her reputation. Klottermans had been utterly consumed by jealousy. She had tried character assassination first, attempting to isolate Els and humiliate her out of the social circle. When that social destruction failed to remove her rival, she moved to the hangar. Furthermore, investigators discovered that Klottermans possessed the exact technical know-how required to pull off the sabotage. She wasn't just a novice passenger, she understood the mechanical anatomy of a parachute rig. Police also noted her highly erratic behavior following the incident. Just a month into the investigation, as the pressure from police questioning began to mount, Klottermans attempted suicide. While her defense team argued this was the grief of a fragile, traumatized woman losing a close friend,
The prosecution saw it very differently. It was the psychological collapse of a guilty conscience, realizing the walls were closing in. In 2010, a jury watched that helmet camera footage. They sat in a silent, packed courtroom in Tongeren, Belgium, watching the final, agonizing seconds of Els Van Doren's life. They saw the desperation. They saw her hands clawing at the sky. And even without a single piece of physical forensic evidence, no DNA matches, no security footage, no smoking gun, they found Klottermans guilty. The sheer mountain of circumstantial evidence, the clear timeline of access, and the undeniable motive of romantic obsession were too heavy to ignore. She was sentenced to 30 years.
But here is the part that still haunts this case. Marcel Sommers, the man who fueled the fire, who lied to both women and stood by while the tension turned lethal, was never charged. Legally speaking, Marcel broke no laws. He wasn't the one holding the scissors in the dark. He was simply a serial liar, a man who manipulated two women simultaneously for his own ego, and did absolutely nothing when the emotional stakes turned incredibly dangerous. He walked out of that courtroom a completely free man, facing zero legal accountability, while one woman went to the grave and another went to a maximum security prison cell.